That's the what is money question.
Mhm.
What is Bitcoin?
That's a question as complicated as what is money. I think if you get a general understanding of money from a number of angles, that we could say Bitcoin is the most superior monetary technology that has ever existed.
So
So,
one of the most superior implementation of the ideas of money that you talked about. You talked about money as speech. You talked about
yes,
money as an idea. You talked about money as sovereignty.
yeah. So we're attaching the concept of money, to your point, to whatever tool best
Right.
satisfies those properties of money or best renders those services we need from money.
And as you said, you're using the word tool and technology interchangeably here.
Yes, yes. And another thing to think about here is that we think often in terms of goods or services, but actually everything is a service. So it's not the physical properties of this pen that I find valuable. It's the services that it renders to me. That I want to write a letter. This serves me by allowing me to lay ink on paper and communicate information. So value, humans attach value, as we alluded to earlier, to services, not goods. So the properties or the services that money renders that human beings value are those five properties: divisibility, durability, recognizability, portability, scarcity. Metals best satisfied those services historically, but Bitcoin, as the most superior monetary technology in human history, essentially perfects them. It's as close to perfection as we've ever been. So, in terms of divisibility, each Bitcoin can be broken down into 100 million subunits called a Satoshi. Um, it could, if that divisibility were ever a problem, which actually, there was a question that came up recently. If you divide the world population by the total supply of Bitcoin, you end up at like 0.3 Bitcoin per person. Call it 300,000 Satoshis per person. What if that was not enough to facilitate economic activity? And the answer to that is Bitcoin can soft fork into further divisibility. So if Bitcoin ate all the money in the world and the average Bitcoiner wealth was, say, 300,000 Satoshis each, but that wasn't divisible enough maybe to buy coffee and do all these day-to-day transactions, what would happen? Well, we would increase its divisibility. So Bitcoin's perfected divisibility. The divisibility of money lets us transact across scales, right? We can buy coffee or we can buy a house. Durability is an interesting one. So clearly something like gold is very durable. It's resistant to degradation over time. Bitcoin is just pure information, but it's stored in a distributed format. So information stored in a distributed fashion tends to be virtually infinitely durable. The example I like to give here is something like the Bible. The Bible is just distributed information. It's stored everywhere and nowhere, so to speak. And for that reason, it has outlasted empires. And Bitcoin's similar, right? You can't make changes to it unilaterally.
But to make explicit, the ways in which it is not durable is the fact that it relies on computing infrastructure. Like it needs computers. So if you were to destroy all the computers in the world,
Yes,
it needs mechanisms that store and transfer information.
that's right.
And so you could attack it. I mean, you could attack gold in the same kind of way, I suppose, through the physics, but it's probably easier to destroy all the computers in the world than it is to destroy all the gold in the world. Maybe not. I don't know. Anyway.
Yeah. Yeah, you're right. Maybe I'm not sure which one would be harder to destroy, but the
But
other thing is there's a dynamic incentive. So every time you destroy Bitcoin miners, you're creating incentives for anyone else with access to electricity to mine
right.
because you're making the algorithm easier.
Yeah, so the destruction is difficult because of the decentralized nature of the whole thing.
And the difficulty adjustment. Yeah.
Yeah, so you're gonna have to use nuclear weapons and cover the whole globe. But anyway,
Yeah.
it's
And by
another.
then we've got much bigger problems than money, right?
That's right. So okay, so that's durability.
So portability, Bitcoin's pure information. It can move at the speed of light. Can't get much faster than that. Recognizability refers to the ability to verify the veracity of the money or its authenticity. So you can actually when we used to transact gold, there were time-honored techniques for verifying that it was gold and not gold-plated lead, for instance. This is where we get the term sound money. A gold coin made a very particular sound when dropped from a certain height. You've seen people biting coins. These are all techniques for testing the authenticity of gold. And with Bitcoin, we have something unique in that if you're running a full node, you can verify that the Bitcoin is Bitcoin, right? It cannot be tampered with. It cannot be faked. And in addition to that, as a node operator, you can audit the total supply of Bitcoin at any time, which is unlike any money in history. So with full certainty, if you're holding 1,000 Bitcoin, you have 1,000 out of a possible 21 million forever. You have a guaranteed fraction of the total supply.
Yeah, so a full node contains information about every transaction that's ever been had, so you can figure out. Yeah, I mean,
that's right.
All the truth of this money is all right there.
Yeah, it's like a fractal constituent of the whole network, right? The whole Bitcoin blockchain is comprised in a node too. Not the proof of work piece, but the entire transaction history.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's unique as well. And that's what makes Bitcoin the ultimate store of value, is that with certainty what the total supply is and will ever be. And that your share of that supply is fixed. It cannot change. It can only improve, actually. If someone loses, if the Satoshi stash is truly gone forever, the million Bitcoin never moves, then we're talking about 1,000 Bitcoin out of 20 million instead, and so on and so forth. As more people lose access to their Bitcoin, they're basically making a contribution to everyone else. It's anti-dilutive.
And there's certain properties of Bitcoin that are sort of a little bit more into the details that ensure that the full nodes, like the size of all the transactions that ever happened, at least currently, can be stored in a single computer, for example.
Yes.
So it doesn't blow up too quickly.
That's right.
But there's arguments that that's not necessary. You can make arguments for that to be a very nice property, but you can also say that there's like drawbacks to it. That's hence the block size debates and all those kinds of things.
Yeah, that was the Bitcoin Cash civil war, right? Was that particular piece?
Yeah,
and ostensibly they were saying, "Oh, we need more transaction throughput to buy more coffee and do more transactions," but what they were actually doing was increasing the size, computing power necessary to run a full node, which it would have theoretically compromised decentralization.
So yeah, but it would, in theory, and this is in theory, it would allow you to have much more transactions.
That's right.
But the drawback, it would, because no longer can be stored in a single personal computer, then it naturally leads to decentralization.
Yes.
Same kind of thing we see with gold.
Which would have compromised its survivability.
Right. Yeah. So what else is there?
The last one, which
Yes.
leads straight into this one, actually is the most important one of money, which is scarcity. And that you need to know the supply is fixed and safeguarded from counterfeiting and inflation, which counterfeiting and inflation are the same thing, by the way. Counterfeiting is criminalized inflation. Inflation is legalized counterfeiting. So central banks today, when they say they're printing money, they're not. They're counterfeiting currency. That's a very important part. And Bitcoin, as I've argued in some of my writing, is more than just an invention. It's actually the discovery of absolute scarcity, and that we have unveiled a property of money that we will only discover once. And it's got really major ramifications for the world at large. So with gold, for instance, as we've covered, it became money because it was the most relatively scarce monetary metal, right? Its supply was hardest to increase over time. However, if we could somehow flip a switch today and make everyone in the world go out and start mining gold, we could increase the supply much more quickly. We could, its historic inflation rate's about 2%. We could double that pretty quickly. With Bitcoin, it is not possible. So no matter how much effort and energy and capital and operational expenditure we pour into the mining network, we cannot deviate from its fixed and diminishing supply curve from between now and the last Bitcoin being mined in 2140 because of the difficulty adjustment. It's adapting to human action, actually. So the harder we pursue it, the more that it recedes, and then the less we pursue it, the more available it makes itself. And it's a real major breakthrough because it's the closest thing to perfect information we've ever had in an economy. And perfect information is it's a theoretical but unattainable state of the market where all market actors have all the relevant information about everything so that they can compete as efficiently as possible. And in a state of pure information, perfect information, we have perfect competition. And in perfect competition, we maximize wealth generation. Mm-hmm. So we're competing as freely as possible from coercive and violent impediments. And so I think Bitcoin, in that sense, is going to pull the world closer to a state of perfect competition than we've ever been before, which would increase wealth generation to an extent we've never seen before.